everyone, and welcome back to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, sparring author Jonathan Taylor. This video is based on one of Daniel Greene's more recent videos, which was in turn inspired by Merphy Napier, or Napier, not exactly sure how that's supposed to be pronounced. The point of this video in this tag, which I will post in the description, is that you're supposed to take various aspects of the writing from various authors and blend them together in the perfect fantasy book. Also, ideally, you should only take one aspect per author. So if you already have, so if you've already taken aspect X from author A, you can't also take aspect Y from author A. You have to pick someone else for every single aspect you're about to mention. I'm going to expand the parameters of this tag somewhat, at least for me, in the sense that I want to be able to include not just people who wrote or who write fantasy novels. I also want to include people who have written for TV or for cinema or for the stage, etc. If you're eligible for the Nobel Prize for Literature, you're eligible for my tag. Also, I'm not just going to stick to people who are currently alive. I'm going to expand that to include pretty much everyone who was alive in the last 500 years. But spoiler alert, most of these are still going to come from the modern age because those are the authors I know best and find most interesting. So with those disclaimers out of the way, let's get into the actual tag. My initial pitch for this fantasy story is going to be something I haven't really seen much in fantasy, namely a comedy of errors, where a certain character tries to accomplish a certain simple and relatable goal, whatever that goal may be. However, as they try to accomplish that goal, they find themselves stuck in increasingly complex and ridiculous situations that they constantly have to deal with. Oscar Wilde has pretty much built his career around making these kinds of stories. However, the best modern example for that is The Big Lebowski. For those of you who haven't seen it, first of all, go watch it. It's amazing, and it's also very freaking funny. I recommend it to you. Second of all, I'll briefly try to go over the plot. The main character of the Big Lebowski gets assaulted by a bunch of people who mistake him for someone else. Then the main character goes to his namesake in order to claim compensation. Doesn't get it, but he acquires it anyway. Then his namesake calls up on him again in order to do a favor for him. He tries to do a favor for him, but the favor goes badly, and he finds out he can't get out of doing the favor, so he still has to do it. And then something else happens in his personal life, or rather, a lot of things happen in his personal life, and he has to deal with that fallout too. It's all really convoluted, really ridiculous, and also really funny. Seriously, go watch The Big Lebowski. I, however, don't want to stick entirely in the realm of comedy with my story. I also want to delve into some more outside of the box, more and darker aspects, darker genres, such as mystery, such as thriller, such as horror. Because why not? 50% of the appeal of this kind of story relies specifically on how much the writer can screw with the reader. Or at least that's how I see it. So, with that out of the way, let's get into the various aspects of the story. Starting with action. With action, I want to go with pretty much the newest author I'm going to mention here, and that is Jenna Moreci. Jenna is the most, Jenna is, well, first of all, she is the most recent author I've nominated. Second of all, she is pretty much the first author tuber I ever became aware of, back in like 2016 or something. And she's put out 3 books by now, and what she manages to nail in every book is making the reader feel involved in the story. She has a very, her style of writing is very heavily based on sensing, on imparting upon the reader the sensations that they would feel if they were to be in that setting, and therefore anchoring you into it. That also translates into her fighting scenes. She knows how to follow intent, action, and consequence, even in a very dynamic, very chaotic setting. She's very easy to follow, and she has very engaging content. And for that reason, Jenna Moreci will do the action for this hypothetical book. For tone, I'm going with Neil Gaiman. One of the guys who doesn't need any introduction. He's written novels, he's written comics, he's written for TV, he's written for cinema. So he goes around a lot. Also, he does. His work is very varied. It's not just sci-fi, not just fantasy, not just horror. He also does. So yeah, he does pretty much a lot of speculative fiction, but it's not. He manages to make it. Also quirky, and not just oppressive, not just dour, not just stakes are constantly high. What are we going to do now? It's a very dynamic reading experience. Following up with one of his books, he is just as Jenna knows how to engage you on a sensory level. Gaiman knows how to engage with you on an intellectual level. So for that reason, Neil Gaiman for tone. With characters, I want to go with David Lodge. He is more of a comedy writer than these last two, and a lot of his books are based around a somewhat ridiculous character placed in regular situations that all of a sudden turn ridiculous, and then he has to navigate the ridiculousness of the situations he finds himself brought in. Lodge always knows how to, despite Lodge knows that that his work is kind of goes into this he's very much aware of how humor works, especially in his novels, and he knows how to ground people, ground characters, and make them seem believable in spite of how zany the world around them gets, or in spite of how zany they themselves can get. So for that reason, David Lodge for characters. As for the magic system, I'm going to go with the old faithful, the obvious choice, Brandon Sanderson. Not because I want this magic system really to stand out in any way, but because I think his delivery of the magic system is what I need. This kind of story is, well, first of all, it goes in several different directions, sometimes at once. So I want a magic system that is pretty grounded, pretty easy to follow, to make sure the readers still keep their attention. And Brandon Sanderson is a very good example of how to do this right. He knows how to base it upon some very basic, very simple premises, and then expand it as is needed, which I think is the perfect approach for a story like this. So for that reason, Brandon Sanderson for the magic system. When it comes to the villains, I went with Friedrich Schiller. In I'm sure none of you really know him, so I'll just explain him briefly. Friedrich Schiller is an 18th century German writer. He mainly wrote, he actually mainly wrote dramas and novellas, focusing on the struggles of the middle class. A lot of the work that Schiller and his contemporaries made would later on go on to form the basis of the comedy of errors genre. So as far as this goes, at least we're in good hands. And I've chosen Schiller precisely because he understands, first of all, what makes characters from these kinds of settings decide to go evil. Second of all, he understands how they can go evil, and therefore not just what their motivations are, but also what their possible avenues for their actions are. For that reason, Friedrich Schiller will go for villains. As for heroes, I went with Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon is more well known today as being a TV producer and movie director, but he has also written for TV and for cinema, and he's been a script doctor. For those of you who don't know, a script doctor looks at the scripts for movies that are in pre-production, and he seeks to change certain small things like certain small aspects of dialogue and characterization to make them more relatable, more palatable, more engaging. To that extent, I think he's a pretty good fit here, because he understands how to take regular people with their own quirks and characteristics, personality quirks and characteristics, and turn these quirks and characteristics into their strengths, into strengths, regardless of how dire the situation around them becomes. So, for that reason, heroes go to Joss Whedon. Now, for the plot, I decided I'm gonna go with Mark Twain. Mark Twain, we pretty much all know what he's about generally, and I think he can pretty well handle these kinds of stories that the kind of story that I want to convey. A story that has a lot of moving parts and a lot of aspects that and a lot of aspects that can apparently sometimes even contradict each other. And also, he is pretty good with sudden shifts in tone. He knows how to make them. Believable. He knows how to make them. How to keep the readers engaged, even in spite of some more unusual changes. So, for that reason, Mark Twain for plot. The next up, we got world building, and with world building, just like magical systems, it has to be delivered on a need-to-know basis. For that reason, I think Ursula K. Le Guin is the most fitting choice, because she knows how to deliver this kind of stuff simply and effectively and intuitively. What you need when you need it. So yeah, that's it. Ursula K. Le Guin for world building. The next category here is battles. However, this kind of comedy of errors doesn't really have battles, at least not in the way the traditional fantasy setting would allow, because it's not really a story about major triumph or major fall. Pettiness really describes a lot about this genre. So for this reason, I am going to replace / alter this category with one for tech, because, like I said, the main theme of these kinds of stories is pettiness and people who are well off screwing each other over because they're petty. And if you're however, you still have to explain how these characters end up being well off, and ideally in a way that doesn't involve slavery. And the way to do that is through technology. And I think the best choice for explaining that technology is Jules Verne. Because not only did Jules Verne really, Jules Verne was a kind of a pioneer when it came to conceptualizing various aspects of modern technology that we now find, that we now not necessarily take for granted, but that we now accept as being long-standing and pretty self-explanatory. He also understands scientific principle and also various ramifications and the logistical aspects that are involved in creating and running technology. So he can also pretty much build anything starting from these standpoints. And even if we're not talking with if we're not going to talk too much about already existing machines and machines where he's very good and adept at showing how people use an understanding of scientific principles and logistics to get themselves out of various problems and more complicated situations. So for that reason, I think Jules Verne is an overall good fit for this story. For romance, I'm gonna go with a choice that is actually very obvious as soon as you think about it for more than 10 seconds, namely Andrew Lloyd Webber. The main reason I chose him is because, well, he managed to make a collection of poems about cats into a smash hit, basically by appealing to the reader's imagination while adding meta commentary about show business. However, the main reason is because he managed to take a pretty generic gothic horror mystery and turn it into a modern romance for the ages by delving into the emotional aspects of the characters and expanding them and allowing them to drive his story in a very relatable and not too melodramatic fashion. So yeah, he absolutely knows how to make the emotional world of these characters work. For that reason, Andrew Lloyd Webber does the romance. Yeah, I just realized how that sounded. As for prose, another pretty difficult choice with a very obvious answer. Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett understands how people influence and affect each other and how they influence and affect their environment, how their environment also influences and affects them. As such, he is pretty much the perfect choice when it comes to describing these very complex systems and connections that would occur between these kinds of characters in a comedy of errors. He managed to make a very vivid and three-dimensional world out of the most two-dimensional idea possible, a world that is literally a disc. So I have no doubt that he can handle this kind of story. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. I in particular like to thank Daniel Greene and Merphy for contributing this idea. I would like to challenge Read with Cindy, writer of Wild Worlds and Paperback Dreams, to also do this tag and see if I want to see what they can come up with. In the meantime, if you have anything you'd like to add, then well, the comment section is available. Otherwise, what can I say? If you're curious when I'll put out my next video, then you can subscribe ideally also ring the bell. And until next time, I am Jonathan Taylor, and this has been the Heir's Lair.